this learning target, 49, goes over how to rationalize the denominator, which is how we deal with division in radicals. Two of our conditions with simplifying radicals have to do with having division. Can't have a fraction under the radical symbol, and you cannot have a radical in the denominator. For example, I cannot have 3 over radical 6. So I need to figure out how to not have a radical 6 in the denominator. Now, I might remember from past experience that if I multiply radical 6 times radical 6, we end up with radical 36, which is really 6. And that would allow us to not have a radical in the denominator. However, I can't just multiply the denominator of a fraction by radical 6. I must also multiply the numerator by radical 6 because really this is 1 in a fancier form. And if we multiply something by 1, we get the same thing, maybe just in a little bit different format. So we multiply 3 times radical 6 to get 3 radical 6. As we mentioned before, radical 6 times radical 6 is 6. We need to check out, can we simplify the numbers that are not under the radical symbol, the 3 and the 6? I can divide them both by 3. So we're going to do that. And that's going to give me 1 radical 6, or just radical 6, over 2. And that's my answer. Similar problem. I have 5 over radical 2. Again, can't have that radical in the denominator. If we multiply denominator by radical 2, we've got to multiply numerator by radical 2 also, again, because that's 1. 5 times radical 2 over 2, because once again, radical 2 times radical 2 is radical 4, which is really 2 when it's simplified. I cannot simplify the 5 and the 2 outside of the radical. We leave it as it is, and we are finished. Now, we don't always have just a single radical in our denominator. Sometimes we have something added to, subtracted from it. For example, 6 over 4 plus radical 2. When that's the case, we have to start to think, well, how do we get rid of having a radical in the denominator by doing that same multiplication idea? We have something called the conjugate, which is when we change the sign between the radical part and the non-radical part. In this case, my conjugate is 4 minus radical 2. Once again, if I multiply numerator and divide that, numerator and denominator by that, we actually end up multiplying by 1. Now remember, you are distributing the 6 to both terms here to get 24 minus 6 radical 2. In the denominator, when you do your distributing, you're going to get 16 minus 4 radical 2 plus 4 radical 2 minus radical 4, which once again is really 2. My minus radical 4 radical 2 and my plus 4 radical 2 are 0 radical 2's. And there's the radical gone, which is what we wanted. 24 minus 6 radical 2. On the bottom, we have 16 minus 2, which is 14. Like we did with the earlier problems, check the numbers outside of radicals. Now this time I have 3 numbers to check. Can we divide them all by the same number? Yes, we can divide them by 2. So we're going to do that. 24 divided by 2 is 12. Minus 6 divided by 2 is minus 3. Leave the radical alone, so we have radical 2. And 14 divided by 2 is 7. And that is my answer. Let's do another one. I have 5 over 2 minus 3 radical 5. Again, there's that pesky radical in the denominator again. We are going to multiply numerator and denominator by the conjugate, 2 plus 3 radical 5. Again, over 2 plus 3 radical 5. Got to distribute. 5 times 2 is 10. 5 times 3 radical 5 is 15 radical 5. Denominator, 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 3 radical 5 is plus 6 radical 5. Negative 3 radical 5 times 2 is negative 6 radical 5. Negative 3 times positive 3 is a negative 9. And radical 5 times radical 5 is radical 25. Once again, that's really just 5. So if I look at this minus 9 times 5, it's really minus 45. Numerator stays put. 10 plus 15 radical 5. I have 4 minus 45, which is a negative 41. The positive 6 radical 5 and the negative 6 radical 5 is 0 radical 5. cannot simplify all three numbers outside my radicals, so we leave our answer as such, and that is finished. That concludes this screencast on rationalizing the denominator.